Hi, this is Richard Rutkowski, Director of Photography on Season 1 of the Audacity. You're listening to the Cinematography Podcast. This show is more like tearing the front off of your device. Behind the surface screen that we get to talk to each other on is code, and that code goes deep. You rip the front off of that, and you suddenly find that these people really do buy into the idea that they're changing the world, and they want to change it in their image of what they want it to be. And that's kind of the fascinating thing.
Hey, this is Cinepod, the Cinematography Podcast, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image presented to you by Hot Rod Cameras. I'm your host, Ben Rock. Today on our show, I speak with Richard Rutkowski, cinematographer on the AMC Plus series The Audacity. Richard is a veteran DP whose credits include The Americans, Masters of the Air, and Jack Ryan. The Audacity is a sharp, funny drama about the billionaire tech culture of Silicon Valley. Richard shot 4 of the 8 episodes and will be back to shoot The Audacity's second season, something he's actually already doing. We dive into how Richard and his crew made Vancouver look convincingly like dusty old Palo Alto, and why establishing a sense of place was a creative priority from day one. Why glass filtration is still one of the most powerful tools in a DP's kit. Richard breaks down exactly how he built the show's haunting wildfire look using physical filters in camera with minimal reliance on post. His philosophy of handheld as intimacy, choreographing the camera to follow the actor so the performance drives his framing. How visual motifs like frame-within-a-frame compositions and strategic spotlight placement were purposeful to the show's themes, rather than being visually inventive for its own sake. After the interview, stick around for our short ends, our pet obsessions of the week. But first, find out what's going on in the world of entertainment in a little segment we like to call Close Focus.
So it is our close focus. What is going on in the world of entertainment, Ben?
Well, this is kind of a hairy issue. Our producer Alana was like, "Are we sure we want to get into it?" And I'm like, "I feel like this is something I have a lot to say about." But it's about the indie, low-budget horror movie Obsession, which is a massive blockbuster projected to make in the neighborhood of $250 million at the box office, and God knows how much when it goes to streaming, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's a bona fide hit, right? And in the wake of its success, the art director from the film, whose name is Sally Choi, has come out pissed off and posted an Instagram post basically railing about how little she was paid on the movie, which reportedly had a $750,000 budget, but we have intel that it might have been a third of that, maybe half of that.
Potentially considerably less.
Yeah. So you can easily find Sally Choi's post on Instagram. Her handle is at Kiwi Surprise, KiWiSupreez. And when I read all this, I felt an instant kinship to her in certain ways and a complete disagreement with her statement in others. In that, like, I was the production designer of a movie that ended up being a giant blockbuster hit that had a teeny tiny budget of $25,000. And
Ben, why don't you tell everyone what that movie is, rather than just dance around it?
I wasn't trying to be coy. It was the Blair Witch Project. So I was the production designer on that. And it's a movie I made with my buddies from film school. And it went on to be a big box office hit in, way back in 1999. And she's complaining about being paid $300 a day. I was paid $300 a week. And granted, it's a long time ago. 1997 is a long time ago. It's almost 30 years ago. Here, like, reading her thing, basically she's saying they should give me a bonus. They should do this. They should do that. Now, here's the thing. I don't know boo about whatever deal might have been struck with the crew on Obsession. But there are 2 things I was told in film school never to agree to work for. And that those are a deferment where, like, okay, I'm working for $300 a day, but my real rate is $1,000 a day or whatever. So that means that if you make money, you have to defer $700 a day, and I'll make the difference later from your profits.
From your profits, yeah.
Or points. which is, I get a certain percentage of whatever profits come into the movie. Now, I've said on this podcast repeatedly, and I believe it, because we talk to some of the best cinematographers working today, and I think it's a scandal that DPs don't get residuals on movies, and it's not just cinematographers; it's anyone covered under IATSE or Teamsters. So that's cinematographers, editors, casting directors, wardrobe designers, visual effects supervisors, composers, on and on. The movies are made by these people, but the only people who get a residual are the actors, the directors, and the writers. In fact, an actor who...
Let me interject one thing.
Please, go ahead.
Quick.
Yeah.
Let me interject one thing. I agree. Residuals give people skin in the game. They give people a real motivation to make a project as well as they possibly can and do the best job, because that's potentially their retirement program. That's potentially, in the future, income that would continue to come in from a job well done today. It is a crying shame, and in some ways, I think morally reprehensible to say that you've got this small, unequal group of people that they deserve all of that, while another group of people deserves none of that. I understand it doesn't have to be equal.
I'll be honest.
But
I think if you're a company grip who worked one day on the film, you should get a teeny tiny residual. If you're a PA who worked, who came in and, there's no job on a film set that shouldn't get a residual. However, that's not the world we're living in, unfortunately.
No, we live where there is a line, and everyone below the line doesn't get it, and everyone above the line does.
And I mean, in order to make it work, we'd have to reorganize the industry. I feel like we just need to abolish the unions and guilds that we have one union that represents everyone, and that would make negotiations with the AMPTP much easier to handle, blah, blah, blah. But of course, then people at these various unions would lose the power that they have in their individual fiefdoms, and it wouldn't really redound to the individual members and the crew people who work on the stuff. That all being said, on the Blair Witch Project, I worked for a deferment, and then when it got into Sundance, Greg Hale, the producer, came to me and said, "We decided to give you back end instead. Is that okay?" And I was like, I had been told, never work for either. You're never going to see a penny. And Blair Witch was the exception that proves the rule, in that I did see many pennies. I did okay off of that. And these are tools that are available to independent productions no matter what. That being said, I get very frustrated reading her post, because I feel like there's an enormous amount of entitlement that she should have money now. Like, I've got news for everyone involved that Curry Barker and the Obsession team have not seen any money from the current box office. They might see it in a quarter. And I don't know what conversations might have gone on behind the scenes. So maybe she went to them after it started blowing up and said, "Hey, how about getting my beak wet?" Whatever the good way of saying that would be. And if they said, "Hell no," yeah, that's uncool. Should they give her something? Probably. Are they obliged to? Not in the least, unless that's in her contract.
And I would say that after that post too, which is now there's 40, almost 5,000 comments on it, and sort of gone crazy all over any sort of filmmaking social media now, with everyone weighing in on one side of the issue or another. I don't think that she helps her cause. I took a quick look at Sally Choi's IMDb just to see what else she'd done, and it looks like she's got 2 credits. So that's not a ton. And I'm not saying that she doesn't deserve to get more money, but I also think that perhaps this wasn't the way to go about.
No, because you're going to alienate people. This is the currency. She art directed a giant blockbuster movie, so that is her ticket in to getting paid way better on the next thing.
That's exactly right. And the people who do the lion's share of the producing, of the creating of a project, are probably working on this project for years, and maybe exclusively for years with nothing else.
Yeah.
It should not be an equal split amongst someone who comes in and works for a month or a week or, a few hours. It needs to be proportional and appropriate. So I think that it's great to draw attention to inequity in the industry. And I commend Sally for doing that, because we all know there's huge inequity. But at the same time, the time to make your deal was when you were getting hired on the job. And it is pretty hard to go back. Like, she could have at that point said, hey, you know what? If this is a monster hit, I would like it in my contract that there is something there. Now, granted,
Basically,
2 years ago,
just like it should be like a boilerplate that after it hits a certain profit margin, that
threshold,
profits are split.
yeah.
And like Ben Affleck and Matt Damon have a production company, and that's how it works. Everyone who works on the crew gets a piece of the film. And
I've heard
I think that is a more,
there's others.
It's super equitable.
Yeah.
It's a good way to do business, but that doesn't mean every independent production is going to do it. And the truth is, in 99.9% of movies like Obsession, no matter how good they are or well directed or whatever, they're never going to see a profit. They're going to end up, getting picked up by streaming, and the producers are going to take a loss. The first movie I ever worked on in my entire life is a straight-to-video movie called Raw Justice. I was the assistant makeup artist, and they told me they were going to pay me $375 a week. I was still in college. This is 1993. And they said they were going to pay me $375 a week. And I'm like, hell yeah, I could not wait. It was shooting in New Orleans and Mobile, Alabama. I had to drive up there from Orlando, right? So then
Raw Justice.
It's not a good film. And then, a couple days later, the line producer, Jill Silverthorne, called me and she said, actually, we can't afford $375 a week. Can you do it for $325 a week? And I was like, abso-fucking-lutely. And couldn't have been more excited. Got in my car, drove up to New Orleans by myself. Like that's the thing. But at the same time, it's like I'm working on a film. I get to see my work on a big, well, in that case, probably mostly a small screen. But it's. This is how we all get in.
But I'm going to say too, Ben, didn't you at the time think that you should have been paid more than that?
No, I didn't. I was actually perfectly happy with that money. It was the early 90s. I was still in college. I was living with my mom. I was excited to be working on a movie that like had, to me, notable stars. I was in film school at the time. I still had one more year of college. And I ate up every second on that. And, they put me up in a hotel, gave me a per diem, paid for all my meals. It was a blast. And I'm not saying that these things aren't torture. They run you ragged. We've all worked on those films where where you have short turnarounds. Like all of her complaints, I think, are legitimate complaints about the way the industry works. And unfortunately, there isn't a better way to do it. When you're making Obsession, like
Not yet.
if they could have afforded to go union, they would have. If they could have afforded to pay everybody more, hopefully they would have, And there are certainly exploitive operations, at work in the business, like the Asylum, that when they have more money to spend, I hear, they don't. But I feel like in the independent film world, that's probably as much as they could afford. Now, I'm no expert at IATSE, but she complains that she didn't flip the movie Union while they were working on it. Well, 750 is not going to make IATSE want to flip, but even if they did, according to somebody on the thread, that would be tier 0, and it would be a $15 an hour position, and she would have made less money. Plus,
less money.
You're going to have to pay fringes and stuff. So
you do get money put into your health and welfare, but you don't have more take home pay.
Yeah. So I understand that she's complaining about we work in a business that kind of sucks in that way and does exploit people, especially when they're starting. But look at the, there are so many companies like obviously Roger Corman's various companies, Concord, etc., or Full Moon.
A lot of people went through there.
Full Moon.
A lot of people worked there. A lot of people. Yeah.
New Line Cinema. Like a lot of these companies started big careers. And this is how you get your big career going. And I don't honestly think that going online to complain about it like this is it's going to get you attention online for being like that. But like if somebody else was thinking about hiring you at that point, you're like, okay, do I want to hire someone who's going to trash talk me later and
try to flip the show?
I don't know. It might be a generational thing. I feel like it's going to get around town that you're a malcontent in that way. I worked on a project several months ago. It was a theater project, and I was one of the designers. And they were pushing us all. I was doing projection design. There was a sound designer. There was a lighting designer. The lighting designer was younger than all of us. And she stood up and kind of railed into the producers at one point about like, all of you old people, meaning us, you're used to working like this, but like, I'm used to like, if you want me to work this many hours, you need to find the money and pay me to do it. And on the one hand, I was like, you go. And on the other hand, I'm like, hey, like we're here to like, if you wanted to make a lot of money, you should have gone into like investment banking or something. Like live theater lighting is not exactly a big money gambit.
I appreciate people standing up for what they believe is fair. The time to do that is at the time that you're being hired, after you've agreed to do a job. And if there's not like major safety concerns, if you're not being abused, if they're not then I mean it's a totally different story. But if you just decide, you know what, I accepted this job, but now I've changed my mind about it. Now I've decided that you owe me more money. I think that's a quick way to get fired. I think it's a quick way to just be dismissed.
Well, and also like Curry Barker is going to obviously get to make whatever the hell he wants to make next. And maybe she already had a lousy relationship with him and wasn't going to come onto his next project. But, you know, it's like if you wanted to curry favor.
I see what you did there.
You could tell even the way I said I couldn't commit to it.
That is a dad joke all over the place.
But if you want to curry favor with the people who you helped make successful, you know, this is, I don't know Curry Barker. I don't know any of these people. Maybe this is how Gen Z and millennials do operate in the business. But I feel like there's always a certain amount of you're going to have to put up with this to a certain degree. And I feel like on TV series where you start getting like the repeatable Fraturday problems where, you know, it's like you're making, I don't want to name any specific show, but you're doing a show that one of those shows that just goes on and on and on, and they could schedule it more intelligently and they choose not to because the network's being cheap or whatever. That's a problem. On an indie film,
that's a problem.
On a small project where like what just happened is the best case scenario for any independent film. There could be nothing better. It's a national talking point. Everyone's talking about the movie. You art directed. You could literally reach out to your network. You like when Blair Witch came out, I'm not a production designer. I can't tell you how many production design jobs I turned down because I am not a production designer. In the wake of that, because people were excited that I production designed a movie that really has very little production design in it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like anyone who's now mildly connected with Obsession has a huge, massive, like gold star on their resume. They are, you know, they're wanted. They're wanted to bring their magic to somebody else's project. So, you know, I think that this is in some ways a really valuable lesson to maybe the younger generations out there who do communicate through memes and do communicate their, you know, personal thoughts and feelings through the internet.
And maybe, I mean, also this might just be an object lesson to you and me that this is how the younger generation is going to operate. That, you know, like they're all about the money. They want that money. But like, you know, I don't know. You and I have both worked on so many low budget films. I've worked on more low budget than I have big budget, and even the bigger budget stuff I've worked on wasn't that big, and you know, like I don't know. There's an abuse point for sure. But there's also, you know, I'm going to get 7 hours instead of 10 hours of sleep tonight, you know, or I'm going to have a less than ideal turnaround, but we'll have the set together. And, you know, like we're mission focused on making a movie. And to me, it's just, I don't know. I don't know. It really just maybe is a generational thing that I look at this and go like, why would you torpedo anyone wanting to work with you by complaining about something when it, again, for the millionth time, there's no chance that any of this box office money is in the producer's hands right now anyway. Like they will be lucky to see some of this money in like 3 or 4 months.
I'll just very quickly explain my very first time ever getting paid on a job. And I wish I was getting $375 a week. I actually thought I should have been being paid more, but because it was my first paid job, the producer knew this and he really, you know, raked me over the coals. I made $225 for my first week, and subsequent weeks were $200 a week. And this was on a Lifetime movie of the week. And it didn't have distribution for Lifetime at the time, but it was from someone who formerly worked for Roger Corman, was a head of production over at Roger Corman. And I did it to get into an industry and to learn a craft, to learn a trade, which I did not know. I did not know how to be a second AC or a loader before that. I learned all of those things on the job. So that was very valuable to me. But then also my next 3 or 4 jobs all came directly because people liked me and I had a good experience there. And I made a whole bunch of great contacts. And I knew that I was not the producer or the director. I was very clear about what my role was. And then I was able to leverage that good experience with other people saying, you know what, it was pretty okay working with Ilya. He was good. Let's have him come back and do something else. And then wouldn't you know it, I made the same amount I made in a week on my second job in a day. And that was a really incredible experience for me to then switch from a feature film where I got, lousy wages to a music video, which was also lousy, but I made the same money in a day that I would have made in a week, which is great.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, I don't know, maybe we've just all been beaten down, because we didn't become hedge fund managers.
That's true.
But, like, I feel like that's just the normal way of things. And, the company that made, or I should say the director who made Raw Justice brought me back for like 6 other projects, and I got paid better on each one. And eventually, Amanda Llewellyn, who was the key makeup artist, she moved on to other stuff. So I became his key makeup artist on a few projects. Are any of them like noteworthy, awesome movies? Not especially, but like, I met great people on them. I made great friends on them. I'm still in touch with a lot of those people. It's just the way it works. I mean, I wish it worked like that more. And I think the question is, do you want to have movies that have adequate financing that you're not going to get hired on with your one IMDb credit anyway? Like, that's the circular argument of it. Do you want to have more? It wouldn't be more of those, but do you want more films to have to reach that threshold before it's worth getting it made? Or would you rather have more Curry Barkers out there making interesting low budget stuff that could break through? And to me, it's like in the middle of the victory lap of this movie, you're going to come and kind of, you were supposed to be inside the tent peeing out, not outside the tent peeing in. And now you're peeing all over the inside of the tent. And I have a problem.
I think it's a really good way I think that's a good way to put it, though, actually, because this is not just a generational thing. This, I think, is pretty universal no matter where you work or what industry that you're in. The people who are responsible directly for your livelihood, it's probably not a good idea to try to shame them in public. That's a pretty
I don't care
idea.
if you're in textiles or build toilet seats. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I think it's an important conversation. I think equity in the industry is an important conversation, and it's not talked about enough. And so in that regard, I think it's great that Sally brings it up. I think it's inelegant the way that it was brought up, especially
Agreed.
in relation to her own experience. But it is an important conversation that people need to be having because, frankly, the more equitable this business can be, the better products it's going to produce. Period.
Thank you so much for coming on. The show is awesome, and it looks amazing. Before we even really get into it, just tell me what brought you to the Audacity. What brought you on board the show?
Okay, I came to the Audacity via director Dan Sackheim. And Dan Sackheim and I had worked together before. We worked on The Americans. We worked on Jack Ryan. We had a long history of talking about shows and visuals and comparing notes on movies that would come out. And we're very fraternal. We really like working with each other. We really like talking about projects, talking about the basis of projects, like what the first motivation is on a project and where it can go. And I think that he found out I was available. It was actually very lucky. Something had just canceled, and so there he was. And he said, "Do you want to come up to Vancouver?" And I said, "Yes." Then I found out it was also with Jonathan Glatzer, and there was a simpatico relationship right away. So I knew this would be fun. And I arrived in Vancouver and got to work.
I didn't realize they shot it in Vancouver. I probably should have looked that up because it takes place in Palo Alto, and it looks like Palo Alto. And actually, I've been to Vancouver. It doesn't look anything like Palo Alto. How did you do that?
I'm really glad you said that, and you're not the first. And so that's a really good outcome. Well, we did shoot a little in Palo Alto, and some of the things that I shot at the end of the schedule. And it was really important to establish place because you're talking about a culture, and the culture is very specifically the tech startup culture and the moneyed culture of Silicon Valley, what it's become. And I think that that's written into the scripts and very present in the characters and their motivations. So thank you for saying that because we worked really hard to keep Vancouver out of the frame. And we kept looking at locations and always thinking, will this sell? Can this help build a world that we're always in Silicon Valley? It was important from the beginning. So we were concentrating on it. Locations helped, art department helped, and how we lit the stages also reflected this idea that it was bright sun outside, darker interiors, more related to what you'd experience if you were right there, in a craftsman home in Palo Alto, or in a
Yeah.
fancy mansion in Palo Alto, a big modernist house like Duncan's, or his quote unquote dumb house, the house where he goes, no connectivity. I think
That was quite a location. I mean, it was how much of it was real? That was a crazy location.
all real. It
It's
was
like
very
the house, for people who haven't seen it, the house is like a Faraday box basically, and you can't bring any devices into it.
That's right. And it's super minimalist, super severe in its construction and its design. And we're continuing on that location in season 2. It's going to be part of season 2. The view out it just managed to work. We had enough of a view that was unobstructed that we could sell that he's at the beach, and we had a garden that was all geometric and big glass windows. So it created some issues with reflection, but it was well worth it for the impression of being in Southern California.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and this kind of brings me to, one of my biggest questions about it was like, it was about the architecture, and I know that that's not necessarily your position as a cinematographer, but we've talked to a lot of DPs who started as architects, people like Checo Varese, and you started as an architect.
I was studying architecture in my first year of college, and actually looked at the GSD and thought, what if I become an architect? And I was studying all the classic and international style, and the more modern ones. In the end, I started making films, and I started realizing that a lot of what an architect does in terms of building spaces happens for filmmaking in terms of building out time. You
Yeah.
build structures in time in a similar way to what the architect can do with space, light. It all actually interweaves very well. So these were very early influences, literally as I was putting my first film loads into the Bolex and starting to make my first short films.
What? Okay, so I know we're here to talk about the Audacity, but like, what drew you from architecture to filmmaking? What I mean, it does seem, like Carlos Gonzalez is another one who we spoke to who did the same thing, and it just seems it seems very interesting to me because there are obvious similarities, but it's like such a different practice and a different kind of job.
Well, I think that one of the reasons I was looking at architecture was because my dad was a fine artist. He was a painter,
Mm.
and didn't want to go into fine art. I wanted to go into something technical. So I was looking at architecture, I was looking at engineering. I was good at math. I was, able to take courses that would prepare one for either field. And then I learned that there were these courses you could take, and I started making films. So it was a very intense few years where I was making these small projects.
Mm.
In the end, I didn't know if I'd go into editing because I really liked editing, or cinematography. And as luck would have it, no one at WGBH wanted to hear about me, but I got on sets as a camera assistant. And then that built up over time, long career from the ground up, loading film and then clapping the board and then pulling focus, all that.
So why editing and cinematography and not like directing?
Well, I was directing. I was directing little films, and I've directed a couple documentaries. I just really like to be at the camera,
Mm.
really be right at the camera. And I think about the editing while I'm working the camera, while I'm either operating or setting up the shots around a set. I'm always thinking about where's the cut, where's the best edit, where's the best position to start to tell this story, and how to advance the stakes. If you have characters and they're in conflict, or you have characters and they're trying to cooperate together, or trying to fall in love, or trying to kill one another, you are front and center in advancing that moment. And I find that very fascinating. And in the end, I think I'm much happier as a cameraman than I might have been as a director. I think it takes a long time to bring projects to fruition. I'm working at 2 different jobs right now as we speak, and I'll go on to another one right after that, and I'm happy with that outcome, that I get to keep making things.
Back to the Audacity. I just want to talk about the architecture of it because I feel like every location kind of was a character. Like Duncan's office with the big weird slide, and the that breakfast nook that's like Zach Galifianakis's happy place, and the therapist's house, which we spend a lot of time in, and a lot of hand wringing over who's going to own the house. It's like you have these people moving around billions, and then you have someone who, is like struggling to keep afloat, but keep her house in Palo Alto and all that. So, I mean, I make no assumption, but like, how involved were you in suggesting or advising or anything on the locations or the set design, in terms of like creating kind of the architectural vibes that these homes create?
When I got into it with Dan Sackheim, we did have some things to do, like the sort of fight club that happens in episode 4 was our creation on a stage.
Such a great
And
scene. That scene is insane.
That's insane.
There's like a moment where I'm like, they have a fight club, and of course they do. Like, that's what these people are like.
Yeah, and the look of it was very much something we created. The Milltown Diner is based on a real place. There's a real place in a town outside of Palo Alto where hung from the ceiling are emblems of all the tech startups and businesses, the Hewlett Packards and whatnot, that sort of are the foundation, the bedrock of the valley's success. And when it comes to housing, that's a huge topic in that part of the world. People talk about what the next startup is or whose technology is crashing, and people talk about real estate because it is a small town that doesn't want to build up too big. It likes its character. It's sort of, I mean, it's one of those places where there's a character of a little neighborhoody place, but it isn't that. These homes are $8 and $9 million because there's a market for them that will support that. And they want their normal privacy, but they also want to show off. And so you see both kinds. You see the modern house, like where Duncan and Lily live, or where Duncan escapes to by the water. That's a real thing too. We drove that highway to get to that community. And you realize that they're invested in every part of the display of status and wealth. It's very big. You were talking about the difference with Succession. Succession's like tearing the front off of how rich people live and die. This show is more like tearing the front off of your device, be it an Android phone or an iPhone, be it a laptop, be it a desktop. Behind the surface screen that we get to talk to each other on is code, and that code goes deep. You rip the front off of that, and you suddenly find that these people really do buy into the idea that they're changing the world, and they want to change it in their image of what they want it to be. And that's kind of the fascinating thing. I think it fuels a lot of problems. And the show talks about those. The show talks about the dangers of technology for children and how, of course, the very people who market it and sell it the best are the ones who don't let their own children use it. And the show also talks the reach, the almost insane reach of this technology. You're in California. I'm in London, England. We're speaking in real time. We're recording it. You will broadcast it to the entire world,
Yeah, it is nuts when you think about it. And yeah, this is like one small town where so much of this innovation, is coming out of. And one thing I kept noticing in this was that even though these people are billionaires, their nonstop need to feel like regular people, to act like they're like, this is normal. I'm just a normal guy. I have 5, Zach Galifianakis doesn't shave and he sits in this diner and hangs out and wants to be left alone. And, like if you didn't know who he was.
Meantime, he has a security team and 3 SUVs to cart him around.
Exactly. But he just looks like if you didn't know who he was, you would just think he was just, a trucker who was sitting there. And I feel like that maybe is part of the character of Palo Alto as well, where there's like something a little rustic and throwbacky about it, but also there's like this undeniable opulence that these characters are living in. But let's get back into the cinematography. When DPs split a show, I mean, some of them shoot the whole thing. I actually just talked to the team that did Spider Noir. I always like to hear how people split it. So, we've had Paola on years ago, again, for Barry. I'm just curious how the two of you communicated, how you split stuff. I know that, she's responsible for certain episodes and you're responsible for certain episodes. Is there ever, like you said that you shot exteriors and stuff in Palo Alto that ended up in other episodes. Was there any other like bleed over between the two of you, or any conversation like, oh, here's how I lit this space, and to give you a baseline, or when you take it over, how much of it are you making it your own?
Well, I think the second you step on set and you're shooting the scene, it's yours to do, and
Yeah.
you have a director and a script, and they're different from the first director and script, and so things shift. At the same time, I was watching her dailies right from the beginning, right from her first day of photography, and I was asking myself, even before I was in Vancouver, okay, how did they do this? How did they achieve that? What was the limitation here? And once I arrived in Vancouver, she was already filming. I would just talk to her crew mostly because she was quite busy. I visited set a couple times. We talked in the office a couple times, and she had some drawings and some source material up on the wall. They had done a booklet of like a style guide, which in the end, things shift, but it was a great start. And you can see that the episodes, they suddenly introduce new things, and you have to go with the new material. You can't stay like, oh, would block one have done that? You don't do that. You say to your director, please, let's reimagine, then I'll tell you if I think this is stepping outside the show's language. We had the wildfire episode, our first one up, episode 3, which involves this crazy story that the wildfires in Napa are starting to pollute the skies, and that Duncan and Lily are going to lose a house, that they're going to
Yeah.
lose a beloved house up in Napa. We never see the house. We never see flame. We just see the effects of it, which is a great allegory in my view. It's a great allegory for the invisibility of all these waves of information running around, and then what they do is very real, and the threat they pose can be very real. One of the threats is that it takes you outside of understanding Mother Nature anymore. These folks who are so smart and so capable can't even acknowledge that Mother Nature is bearing down on them with like really crimson, dangerous, smoky, ashy skies.
I know. Well, and the way that it looks when they go outside looks just like when we get wildfires here in LA, where everything kind of looks kind of orangey brown.
Thank you. I worked hard on that with prep and with different techniques to achieve that, but it also required the buy-in from the producers. So I shot a bunch of tests before we started that episode, showed it to the production, Jonathan, Gina, and had buy-in. A lot of it was that Jonathan had lost a home in the Altadena fire.
Oof.
And so very meaningful to him, very meaningful, this resonance of like Mother Nature will take what you think you own. And I think that is, even more in season 2 going to become part of storytelling. And I think that's great. I think it's a great.
Well, what I loved about how you did that was, like, in that episode, we're in the interpersonal struggle, and like, everybody's pretending that there isn't a wildfire and going about their lives. And then you'd have an exterior, and I would be like, and immediately I have, from living in LA, especially from being here during the massive fires last year, like just kind of this body sense of like, when I saw that color palette, it was like, oh God, like, like it creates that sense, and it wasn't hitting us over the head with it. It was just like a reminder of like, oh, the fire's real, fire's coming,
Well, thank you. That was exactly the goal, and
Mm.
also to stage it. So at first it's just a little pink on the horizon, and then it's, oh, the sky is a little heavier than normal, and then it's like, oh no, we're in a full blown wear a mask, don't go outside. I
So
love that moment when Joanne, who's succeeded in dropping off her son's specimen at the hospital,
yeah.
she's so psyched because it was a struggle, and she comes out to this patio devoid of people but her, and celebrates because it's like, this is unbelievable. I did it. And of course, her success and her care for her son are not exactly in sync with what Mother Nature has to offer. So it's
It was like the end of Lucio Fulci's The Beyond or something, where she's kind of in a hellscape. Yeah, I mean, well, well, how did you go about achieving that? Because that actually is a pretty amazing look.
a lot of it was done with more simple tools than people would imagine. It was glass filtration. So we were taking antique suedes 1 and 2, going stronger towards the end of the show. We were taking sepia grads, we were taking ND grads, sometimes top and bottom, and we were also adding something called a fire sky grad at the very end, which was a totally unique filter that in the process of researching I discovered. And we also changed our looks, the LUT in the camera. We gradually reduced contrast because smoky air is low contrast to look at. And we gradually like tapped down on highlights so that we were always saying like, oh, clouds and smoke are filtering the sun very aggressively. And then we'd add a little extra diffusion to lift the floor because when you're in a smoky environment, you see this lifted black all around you. And it's often like a gray. It sort of shifts to a gray, especially if there's a lot of ash on the ground. And the ground doesn't reflect in the same way. When you go outside on a sunny day in California, the ground is reflecting up light, pavement or a road or the green. And here, no, you're not seeing that because it's totally different conditions. So I did an extensive set of tests with glass filters combined with a little bit of work with the DIT. And then we took that to Picture Shop. Tim Vincent was our colorist and is again on season 2. And we took the work in and said, well, what can we do that's not too crazy? What can we do that still keeps all the information coming to the viewer, but definitely gives a bedrock view of like, oh no, it's not good out there. And I'm very pleased with the result, actually. And I think when I'm pleased, it's not just because of what I look at, it's also because of the message in the thematic content of the show. And I thought it merged technique right up to what the writing had. And I like that.
I mean, like when you're working, do you think a lot about the theme of the project that you're working on and how to bring that out?
100%. 100%. When I spoke to you a few years ago about Masters of the Air, it's a very different show with a very different look and a very different set of obligations to the image. There's many things about Masters that I like. Very few, other than maybe some framing ideas, have anything to do with the Audacity. Mm-hmm. The Audacity is its own piece of writing. It's its own show. It has its own character and it's consistent. As we got towards the later episodes, I felt the cast clicking in, locking in, finding the voice that their character and the overall show had. I was very impressed with the entire cast. I don't want to single anyone out, although our leads are very good and accomplished. But we also had new actors like Everett, who plays Orson. Amazing, terrific. Rob Corddry, who I'd never worked with, amazing.
Oh, he's so good. And I think of Rob Corddry as like a comedian, because he's, from The Daily Show and he did a lot of comedy movies. And yeah, it's like he's probably the most sympathetic character on the entire show. He's like the one guy who you're like, God, I just like, why is everyone being so awful to him? He just gets the worst of it all, but he doesn't take it as like a sad sacky kind of thing. He's so good.
Yeah, but everyone at one point or another gets a moment where you can feel that they have struggles. Megan Rath is Anushka, Martin, played by Simon. I mean, every character, and certainly the kids. So it became an ensemble, and it started locking in. I think from really the third or fourth episode on, it started locking in, and the finale was incredible. But yes, to answer your question, I think thematically, I often talk to the directors about what is the takeaway in a scene? What is the principal moment to either lead up to or to pull away from? Because sometimes the difficulty is you build up such a big moment that you need to think about, oh, what's the echo of this like? How do we pull back from this moment and have some wisdom in how we get out of the scene? And I was often talking to them about screens and framing, the idea that we are functioning on a screen right now because of all this technology. I'm framed, you're framed, our frame is within another frame. Mm-hmm. And we were mirroring that sometimes in composition and in intention with coverage. Megan Rath is towards the end of episode 3. She goes home to say to her husband, Martin, look, it's incredible what you've done with this AI therapy bot. Now it's a real thing, and we need to talk about how to use it. And he sort of pushes her back, saying, you resisted me for so long. You insulted me for so long. And he leaves her, and we go outside the house, and we frame her in a window, which we did in episode 7, I think, as well. We frame her in a window as a person alone, stuck in the framework that she's created as a wife, as a professional, as a homeowner. Even she has this modern house and she's framed in it, and she's not happy. She's not connected. So I thought that those thematic ideas and sort of visual, metaphorical outcomes were what I was always driving at.
That's interesting. And so like, does that come about like when you're working with the director on prep? Do you guys spitball ideas like that? Is that stuff that comes about when you're on set and you see the blocking that you're like, oh wow, I can get her perfectly in this window? Do you ever like suggest like, hey, if I put her in this window, I can get this image? Like, how do we find those images?
It ebbs and flows. And sometimes you talk about in prep a specific idea for a shot, and then you go back into the work, you show up on the floor, you rehearse it, and you say, nope, it's this. Look at this. And
Mm,
so you have to be open to that. I talk about this with the operators, and I talk about this, to myself as I'm making the thing. I'm like, there's what was written and got you interested among, the words on the page and what your notes you've taken and the preparations you've made. Then there's what you shoot, which is different. And you have to acknowledge what we're shooting now, while it comes off this page, has to be what's the best there right now to shoot. Then there's what gets edited. And it's that third process that's so important. They can either accept or reject things I produce in blocking and framing to an outcome that may look like what I intended, or it might become totally different. But I have to accept that editing is one of the most powerful moments. Once it's edited, that's what people
mm.
take away. They don't generally dive into the possibilities of what it might have been. They just accept that this is the scene. I am very, very clear with directors at the beginning. I'm going to have a lot of ideas. I'm going to have things I throw out to you. I'm going to have references, and they're not always going to be a TV show or a film. They're going to be still photography, painting, a performance I may have seen, a piece of lighting on the stage that I liked. And I'll bring that constantly. And you just tell me when it like clicks with you or not. Often directors who are, I think arguably more established and more capable professionally love to get that input. They don't
Yeah.
shy from it. And then once they've received it, they'll sometimes take it another level and they'll say, you know what, that's interesting because we didn't talk about this, but I was thinking about getting out of the car with the character. How can we do that? And that's what that collaboration eventually produces the scene, the blocking in the scene. Sometimes it's the actor. We rode around with Billy Magnuson in a car for hours and hours and hours, and he would come up with stuff right on the spot, and he knew where the lens was. And so that's a gift. You're working with a professional who really understands his frame and his scale in it and how he can work that. I thought it was lovely.
Yeah, he is wonderful in the show too. Like he's just so engaging, and it's like a weird line to walk because he's playing someone who's kind of fundamentally unlikable, but you still find yourself weirdly rooting for him. It's a different way into a Walter White kind of a guy.
Yes, yes. It's very much the old Chubbawampa song. I get knocked down, but I get up again.
You have no idea how much we've talked about Chumbawamba on the podcast. Um, there's a great documentary about them. So anyway, but well, when you talk about that frame within a frame thing, were there other kind of visual cues or motifs that you experimented with specific in regard to specific characters? Like finding with Megan, trying to find that frame within a frame, or was the frame within a frame the kind of thing you were going for a lot of people?
We were quite often trying to express how hard it is to access Zach, who plays Bardoff, that he doesn't make direct eye contact, that he avoids, that he has uh, something's up with that character that makes it hard to be close to him. Does he have a wife? Does he have a family? We don't even know. He's at his most avuncular when he's in a war trench
Yeah.
playing with soldier reenactments and fake guns. So it's interesting because framing wise, you then start thinking, well, how many times should I be right in his eye line versus avoiding it or coming at him from an off angle? You also start thinking about how to express the appeal that Bardoff has for Duncan. Like you start to think, well, what's a framing that sort of shows that what Duncan really wants here is a dad. He wants a father figure because he lost his father and he talks right away in the beginning of the show about what would my father think, all this sort of stuff. And I think the only other thing that I could point to, which was interesting as a sort of clear visual metaphor, was in episode 8. Episode 8 is sort of the culmination of a lot of action. There's been a lot of action. There's been a lot of development. And we're going to find out that up at the Watch Code Forum, this theater space where they're doing essentially a very elaborate masculine TED talk. And Duncan's the guest, of course. It's like the culmination of his work throughout the season. And he comes out and he's in the spotlight, and he's so happy to have the spotlight trained on him, because he really always wanted to have this success visible in public within the community of coders and business people in the Valley. The spotlight hits him at exactly the wrong moment, exactly when he discovers, no spoilers, but he discovers something so tragic and so hard to deal with.
Yeah.
He finds himself in the spotlight, and it's bitter. It's not just bittersweet. It's actually, it's actually like a joke. Like, why should I be in the spotlight right now? Now I got to run from it.
Yeah.
And then he goes down to the other event, which is an event for the school where their child goes. Their child goes to this school. And the school is very fancy, and the parents are all very fancy, and they're throwing an event that's lit up like a cruise ship or something, like with colored lights and tulle fabric and a big stage for them to perform on. And everyone's sort of self-congratulatory about how they support this wonderful, very wealthy school. And Lily has done her own machinations that night to help their daughter. And she has the spotlight fall on her right at the worst moment, absolutely the worst moment, because of what Duncan learns. They're face to face, and the spotlight comes to her, and instead of shying away from the spotlight, she goes up and gets her applause and drinks her champagne. Their daughter also has a spotlight, although it's from an oncoming train. Anything. But she winds up right in the spotlight herself. So
now, was that in the script, or was that, because that is such a lighting thing, that was your idea to kind of do the spotlight the way that it was done?
It was both an idea based on what the content of the scene is. So it is in the script. It isn't saying specifically a spotlight falls on Duncan, but you sort of see it. You read the scene and you're like, okay, this is cool. There's going to be a big video wall. Content's going to be playing. That's good storytelling. I can stack Duncan up against that content. I can reverse from details of that content back to his face. And this was all worked out well with director Alex Bueno. And then I can show him kind of hollowed, that thing where you're on the back side of the performer and their face comes towards you. The whole audience can't see what's on his face.
Yeah.
Hollowed by this spotlight. It was a natural thing to think of doing, And then downstairs, of course, also there's moving lights at the beginning of the scene, because I wanted the people coming in and sitting at their tables for the benefit to be like, oh, we're the stars. There's this tension of like, who are we doing this for? Is it really for the kids? Maybe we don't need to throw a $400,000 party if it's for the kids. We would give that money and the kids would use it. So it's a little bit about the adults and their backstory, their ulterior motives to being at such an event and showing off the money they can donate and showing off the school their kids get to go to. So that was another spotlight choice, where you have spotlights chasing the room, a little bit like an awards show, actually, and then a spotlight hitting the person speaking, be it Dr. Webb, the principal, or Lily, the donor. And then with Jameson, that was just, let's be clear, we're not going to put a train and a teenager on the tracks together. We're not going to do it. There's no reason if I can come up with another visual solution that's equally impactful. And we created this train by framing out a blue screen on the back of a truck. And then I punctured the blue screen with little lights in the exact orientation they would be on a Caltrans train that runs through Palo Alto. And so I think I had just a par bulb, or maybe it was an ACL up top. And then I had two LED-based instruments down below that glowed a little orange, because that's how that looks on those trains. We turned off the blue screen for when the train's at a distance. It just becomes this black silhouette, even more scary, actually. But there was something about the way it moved towards us and the little shake, that little shimmy rolling down the tracks and the light on it. And the actress shows up and she goes, is that a real train? And I was like, thank you. We're completely safe. And there's like the person in the little truck that's driving, and they're in radio communication with us. Train's never going to get near you. But what it allowed us to do is we then parked it at an adjacent spot where there was a railway crossing. And you're supposed to see that another person has actually met their end at this train.
Yeah.
And that's when VFX used the blue screen to paint in the body of the train. A very effective solution.
Anyway, that's all fascinating. We haven't really gotten into lenses, so I just kind of wanted to, like I feel like when I was watching the show, it's not a show that's like, it didn't feel to me like a show that was using lens specifically as a comment, like you might have a wide angle lens in someone's face to punctuate a big moment. It felt like it was letting us kind of, it was almost encouraging us to make our own, to draw our own conclusions. So I have my thoughts about what lenses you might have used, but like what was the lens package, and like what kind of lenses did you tend to reach for?
We were using signature primes, ARRI signature primes on the ARRI Alexa 35. And a lot of the show is handheld, even if it doesn't per se look it in every shot, because sometimes we'll set the handheld camera down on a bag or set it on a little halo head on a tripod. But the goal was to be very subjective and moving with the performer. And in fact, I often looked at it as choreography. The performer starts rehearsing a scene, you start watching the blocking, and you say, well, I need to choreograph the lens and the operation to move with this, because I want the actor and the dialogue to be the motivator for camera, not the other way around. They shouldn't fit to a frame that we've pre-established. It's almost a little more documentarian, like moving with the performer and letting them reveal a room. So very rarely do we start on a room and the performer walks into frame. It's usually we're moving with, and then we come into a room and reveal the surroundings. And it is not anything I made up or Lucy Forbes made up or anything. It's just a well-known technique for staying front and center to performance and to content that is generated principally by the character, by the actor. But it's very powerful for this show and very effective, and gives you the idea that you can sense who the people are because you feel like you've spent a lot of time with them. So you're rarely more than 8 or 10 feet away. You're usually on like a 35 millimeter, maybe a 40. Sometimes you'll drop back to like a 25 or a 18 even. And then very rarely did it go up on a crane arm and get a very wide shot of something. Very rarely past 18, very rarely past a 50, sometimes like a 75. But you're not working extremes. We're not getting out a 400 millimeter. We're not getting out a 14 millimeter very often, if at all. And we also weren't using toys. When I say toys, I mean technical things like a low angle prism, remote head, a lens baby, or things like that. We were trying to stay very basic and very responsive in the camera, but not trying to guide the scene with the camera. But then towards the end, we got a little more technical with using like a Leo probe on a push-up to Ruffidge's face when he's coming out of the trench, when they're doing the trench reenactment. And we started using remote arms and heads more, just mostly because the storytelling asked for it, because it was like, this will be the best way to get this shot.
Well, like the war reenactment stuff, I love that you guys filmed it. It felt like a war movie. It felt like I was watching Saving Private Ryan or something. And it felt like it was using those techniques a little bit more, especially where like Rob Corddry's someone who was like dealing with PTSD. And so we were trying to...
Andy has a limp and he's being forced to run across the battlefield.
Yeah, and it's all so he could make this deal and get this tech stack for the VA and do good for his own people. But that scene in particular felt, or it wasn't one scene, but the couple of scenes where they were doing the reenactments, those felt more like maybe like you're saying toys. Like it felt like more war film language was being used. I don't know what you were using to film it with, but it felt that way for sure.
A little bit of Steadicam there. The idea was that uh, Bardoff himself is putting on this show. He's kind of like his sandbox is now filled with toy soldiers. And
Yeah.
because he's a billionaire, he can afford the best sandbox and the best toy soldiers and the best toy Jeeps and the best toy howitzers. And he starts off a little cheesy with the facade of a French village, and he's having a hard time getting everyone to, equal the depth of a war scene that he wants to see. But by the time we got to 8, and he's invited right at the beginning of episode 8, he invites Ruffage to participate and gives him a World War I American uniform and hands him a gun. The idea is that it's so over the top and so kind of produced a moment, like a big fancy billionaire sandbox playing a big fancy billionaire war game with pyro going off and everything, that we then wanted stylistically to shift into something that reflected that. So the image changes for that scene to reflect, hey, you're in this fantasy of this over the top image of what a soldier is. Of course, what's great about the Rob Corddry character is he gets to tell Bardoff, no, you're insane. You don't know anything about war, and you don't know anything about warriors, and this is wrong. What you're doing is wrong. And I think it's a very profound part of the series leading to the outcome in episode 8, which is kind of devastating. So we played the game of like, this is hyped up because it reflects the ego of the man who created it.
Are there any like big challenges that maybe didn't look like big challenges on the page, but when you got there, you realized that the location was going to be fighting you or whatever, or any just massive wins that you guys had while you were doing the show that, where you're like, it was so cool how we pulled off this setup, this shot, this, how we got this one sequence to be built the way that it was?
Uh, I'll be honest, that's a great question because stuff always comes up. I had a very good crew. I had a very good experienced crew. And I've had experience and my directors had experience. When we see that weather is going to make something go wrong, we pivot. We either go into a car or we make use of the rain. Like there's that scene in episode 7 where they're starting to get Xander to talk to actual vets. They're starting to get the AGI therapy bot to actually talk to vets. And we go to what's supposed to be somewhere in the middle of the country in a depressed area. A veteran, a female with a part of her leg was amputated, gets into her car. Well, we're not going to travel to the middle of the country, and we're not going to really even travel that far from another set we have to film. So the thing is, the most important thing with that was to give it a totally different texture. So it was embracing the cloud, actually. It was saying, yeah, we're taking cloud. And I start gradding the sky, and I start putting a polarizer in, and I start dialing the polarizer to mute any highlights. And I totally changed the color look. So that was one example where you pivot, and it actually made it better. Every day is a challenge. And you start to strategize how you're going to make your day. And you start a lot to strategize how you're going to take advantage of light. We arrive at Agnieszka and Martin's house, and it's sunny. I'm going to want to work on scenes that take the best advantage of that sun, knowing that then I'm going to hit the shoulder of dusk, and then I need to shoot a night scene. And so you're constantly like watching the progression of the day in that way. I just had such good people around me. I don't think anything posed the biggest of challenges. That whole thing at the end where we're going back and forth between the watch code upstairs and the school benefit downstairs.
Yeah.
And you had to show up with the long escalator, and there was a big glass front to what's supposed to be a huge hotel space that they're doing this in. That was really tightly choreographed in terms of when we had to see sun, when we had to see darker skies, and when we had to have night. And we couldn't black out that entire huge frontage of that building. We blacked out a fair amount of it. I had a great rigging grip, Tyler. And we had an amazing advantage in just working the schedule to fit where we needed to be when. We really did the whole watch code thing in a day, actually a little less.
Really?
And that was one day, that whole sequence with Billy talking to Nena Marks and on stage and the revelations and all this.
Wow, that is a lot.
Thank you. Yes. So I guess your question did bring up something that was hard to do in a day, but I think we actually added on a couple things that day as well. I think we had one or two other little parts to do, all of it within that center. So you're just rolling cameras one place another. Then we did between the argument between Lily and the principal in a sort of back hall, and all the work in the school benefit, and we're having to deal with children's hours for that. That was all 2 days. And in fact, one of those days, I think we then jumped outside once it was dark to show the scene where they get back on the bus with their instruments and in their suits from performing, and they're going to go home. So those are the kinds of challenges I mostly remember, is making sure that we planned our days well and that we could get to everything we intended. But I had good directors. Alex Bueno was great. Dan Sackheim is a super pro. And Dan also really helped embrace the ideas we had visually and move them forward with the production, because we weren't necessarily always looking like previous episodes or the next episode. We were sometimes doing our own particular thing. The Fight Club is a good example. We used slow motion, and there was almost no slow motion in this show, but slow motion worked for the Fight Club, and then it worked later. Episode 8, we did some.
I feel like slow motion, when I think of the movie Fight Club, I think of some of those great slow motion shots. So that maybe is part of even what clued me into what was going on in that scene, because it was such a radical turn.
You're clearly observant, because when you bring these techniques up, you're inevitably borrowing on an existing example.
Yeah.
You don't want it to be a carbon copy. You don't want to do movie karaoke. You're going to do something completely different from the page, but you're going to certainly look at techniques that have worked in the past.
Well, like what I appreciated about stuff like that, is, like, to go back a little bit to the Fight Club moment, is that, like, you never, in the script, it never explains what's going on. As a viewer, you're just kind of brought into it, and you have to figure it out while it's happening. And so any little thing you can do to make it clearer to me as an audience, like, I never questioned it when I was watching it, and I didn't think about the slow-mo till you just brought it up, but, like, that was what made me go, oh yeah, like, that's why we're there. And the fact that it was kind of a kind of a creative departure from the way the other stuff had been shot, drew a little bit of emphasis to it, but not in a way that was like, it wasn't like a hard right turn in a record scratch moment. It was just sort of like, okay, now we're in this other world where this other thing happens that we haven't seen in here yet, and yet another shade of Palo Alto, but it's not out of nowhere, because we've been, like, seeing all of these, like, masculinity influencer people that the Orson character's watching. Like, we get that there's this, like, toxic masculinity hanging over the whole place.
Right. And you stay tied to your principal characters, which is Duncan and Bardoff are settling terms of how they are either going to not work together or work together. That's what that scene's really about, is he has to show Bardoff that he's tough enough. And Bardo wants to see if he's tough enough. And he lures him into this circumstance with Orlando Lee to do that. You also often in shows have to introduce something fast. So it's like a hit and run. You're going to show up, establish what the situation is, build the scene, leave the scene. And you definitely leave the scene on Bardoff's face, because it's like, okay, Duncan shows him, I can do this if I'm pushed. And Bardoff is like, all right, I'm not sure I like this.
No, it's a lot of fun. Well, thank you so much for coming back to the show, and I hope a lot of people, catch the Audacity, which is on AMC Plus currently, and it's just a great piece of work, and I'm glad to know that you're doing a second season. That's awesome to hear.
We're just starting. We're very excited about it.
Yeah, I'm
giving spoilers away, but it's great writing again.
I'm fascinated to see where it goes. So, but before we go, is there any place people can find you online, a website, Instagram, anything that you would want to plug?
Sure. I am at Richard Rutkowski DP on Instagram. At Richard Rutkowski, my name, DP on Instagram. I have a website, scenoevil.net, SCE-NO-EVIL.net. It's a little behind the times. I don't get that much time to update it, but it has a combination of still photographs and clips from work. I haven't yet updated it with the Audacity. I will get to it. But what's interesting to me is I like sort of talking about things outside of just the television work. And sometimes people will contact me and they'll be like, I've been thinking I want to be a DP. How can I get started? Can I come assist you? And if you write to me, and it might take one or two tries, but if you write to me, I will respond. But sometimes where the conversation goes in that realm is better because it goes to actual creativity and art. And I find out people actually should probably be producing theater, or people should probably be writing, because what they talk about starts to tell me that maybe 12 hours on set for 30 years is not where they're at.
I gotta tell you, I not to geek out too hard, but I think The Americans is one of the best TV series of the last 20 years. It's just top to bottom so well done, and I wish every series was. I mean, it was just a brilliant example of what it is, and I think it moved the needle for me. Like it just set a very high bar, and it was kind of, I think, what we call now peak TV. But The Americans is just so smart, such a great cast, looked so, like, everything about it felt so dialed in. I would compare it to things like Mad Men or whatever that were also that felt like such a complete, contained, amazingly thought out world. It's just such great work.
Thanks. It was intense because I was the only DP, so I would spend my weekends prepping or pre-lighting, and I would work all week. It was a very physically demanding show, but I also liked being kind of the handmade creator of the visual. I really liked having that ability from the beginning to get it started. I liked it a lot.
Well, anyway, we'll have you back on when we do season 2 or anything else that you have that you want to talk about. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
All right, so that was Richard Rutkowski. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Amazing, amazing work.
All right, Ben, it is our short end time. It's the time we talk about our pet obsessions of the week. What are you obsessed about?
I'm enjoying an Instagram feed called Beverly Hills Content Studios, even though the word content is in the name of their company. And it's basically the very passionate, forceful opinions of Sid Sheinberg's son. If you don't know who Sid Sheinberg was, he was the head of
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him. Lightweight. He was the head of Universal Studios, who is basically responsible for the career of Steven Spielberg, and also who I like to think of as the malefactor who ruined Terry Gilliam's Brazil. And then Terry Gilliam, if you ever, there's a great book called The Battle of Brazil, in which Sid Sheinberg is like the villain. But anyway, his son has this company called Beverly Hills Content Studios, and he goes on Instagram and talks from the heart. Some might call it an old man rant. I can go for a good old man rant once in a while about what's right and wrong in our business right now. And, he's proposing solutions or talking about, when things were better. It's just fun to listen to him. It's fun to listen to somebody who has the perspective of having, grown up in this business, is now, on the older side, certainly older than us, if that's even possible. But is still kind of looking at the business and kind of saying, like, how can we make the business better? Because that's really his whole vibe, is like, the business is kind of broken. What can we do? What should be better? Why is it like this? What can be done? And I just I don't know if I would call it an obsession, but I started following him and checking out what he had to say. And there's real value in listening to someone who's been around this business, in his case, probably 50, 60 years, and who understands the ins and outs of it, and probably understands it better because his father very successfully ran one of the major studios during its most successful time, at a time when Hollywood was kind of the leading edge of culture in the world, which I'd say it still has a voice in there now, but it's not what it used to be. You know what I mean?
There's some real benefits to nepotism. I think especially when you're talking about a really niche, spot in the professional world where not people get a lot of access to. And so he's got a lot of access. I also follow this Instagram account. I think that he's got a lot of really good hot takes on the business. There's some things he says that I don't totally agree with. Most notably, the fact that content is in the name of his company. But kidding aside, really, it's important for people to be having these conversations because you don't make it better in the dark. You got to have daylight. You got to know what's going on. You got to talk about the problems in order to fix them. So I appreciate him bringing it up and him doing a self-promotional channel that is about, hiring his studio, but works in his own personal experience and his life into it and the life of his father, which I think is super cool.
Anyway, so Ilya, what is your pet thingamabob of the week?
Well, it's a company called Ziller. Their website is zillerpro.com, and Hot Rod Cameras is now selling their products. In particular, there is a product called Zipper. Now, neither Ziller nor Zipper have a letter E in it. I don't know what they have against the letter E, but it's Zilr, Zipr, and the Zipper is unlike anything you've ever seen in production. At the same time, it is exactly like many things you've seen in production. It is a folding cart. It is a electric powered production cart, but it looks like a cart, let's say, that you'd use to haul your kids around or your kid around at the farmer's market. It is a folding cart. Now, the folding cart squishes up horizontally, but it also squishes vertically. And when it's in the squished configuration, it's holding, I'd say it's about 25 to 30% of its full size. And its full size is considerable. And it's got powered hubs. And these powered hubs are powerful. It'll go 10 miles an hour. It will hold 600 pounds. And the maximum travel distance is 18 miles on a charge. It is incredible in that regard. But what my description is failing to make clear here is that its solid aluminum frame is super, super robust, and you can ride it and drive it. So in those 18 miles, in theory, you don't have to be walking, pushing, or pulling this electric-powered cart. You can be riding on the cart. In fact, there's actually a seat for a second person to ride on the cart, like adult-size riders, which is kind of amazing. It is not easy to look cool while you're doing this.
Definitely
the website does a good job of trying to make.
But are
these
you using it to haul gear
look,
around, or are you using it to shoot out of?
I would say it's most practical for hauling gear. And there's a lot of gear hauling. And I've been to, I can't even tell you how many trade shows where someone has the unmotorized Amazon/Costco version of a folding cart where they have a bunch of Pelican cases and tripods and stands and stuff like piled into. This is like that on steroids, like serious steroids. This is a professional tool that also is just pretty freaking cool that you can plop your butt on and you can drive like it was like some sort of go-kart, but it is, it's a professional movie making tool. I did see people at NAB, plop onto the back of the Zipper cart that we had on display there and have a gimbal and do a walk and talk with someone. And I'm sure that you could do that if the ground is relatively smooth. This is not, you could use this off-road, but for shooting, I would say you want to be on a smooth surface. But this thing's super small. It'll fit in the trunk of your car. It doesn't weigh too much. I think it's about 60 to 70 pounds, all in. So relatively lightweight, but it can transport a massive amount of stuff, and you can tow stuff with it. So I think it's great. Hot Rod Cameras has got it in stock as a demo item, so anyone can come in and try it. You can try driving it. You just got to be careful to learn the controls and don't crash into anything, and you'll be doing just fine. We have sold a couple that I know are being used on a major studio lot in town. I expect that once people start to see these in use more often, they're going to start to pop up all over the place. And you should get them at Hot Rod Cameras. Hot Rod Cameras has got the 2-wheel drive, the 4-wheel drive version. And frankly, the big difference is 2-wheel drive goes further. The 4-wheel drive goes up hills at steeper angles. They both have the same speed and roughly the same capacity.
So you should buy both. You should buy one of each.
You can also switch the 4-wheel drive into 2-wheel drive mode so that you got some options.
Very cool.
Yeah, anyway, check it out. It's at Hot Rod Cameras. We'll put a link in the show notes over at Cam Noir. All right, so Ben, that does it for this episode. Where can people find you? if they want to get in touch.
You can find me at benrock.com. That's my website. Hopefully we're going to have news pretty soon about the short film that I directed, which is now called Until the End. Hopefully we'll have news about it getting into festivals. So watch this space. And when we find out if we're in any festivals, I'll talk about it here. So Ilya, where can people find you?
Can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com, until I finish building that website, which has just started out. So yeah, Hot Rod Cameras, that's where we've got all of our products for sale. We have a store in Burbank, California, and a new store in Portland, Oregon that's open by appointment. So if you are in need of lighting, lenses, gear, please hit us up. We've got all kinds of stuff, about 800 brands of gear.
Nice. Well, and you just had a very successful Cine Beer right after Cine Gear.
We did. One of our, actually, I think this may have been the best Cine Beer we ever had. We had Magic by Sharpo, who was there also, too.
So dang it, I missed that. I wasn't there for the Magic.
All right. Well, maybe next year. We also had an incredible craft beer from Brewyard. We had a dozen incredible sponsors. I don't want to name them all because I'm worried that I'm going to forget someone, but we gave away $10,000 worth of gear, including some really cool stuff, some very valuable stuff, cameras and drives and you name it. And it was a huge hit with the community. We had a lot of people come out telling me that it was their favorite party again this year. So we've had to become slightly more selective because we're running out of space when people come to this, but I think we've curated a really excellent group of people who are working professionals and members of all different sorts of guilds. We had people all over the world show up from South America, from Europe, from Asia, and all kinds of people with like those letters after their name, the ASCs, the BSCs, the different things like that. So Cine Gear is the lead up to Cine Beer. Cine Beer is one of the originals, and if you are in Los Angeles for Cine Gear, you should definitely apply to come to Cine Beer. It is a great time.
I agree. I've been to, I think, most of them. Who do we need to thank?
We need to thank the two main people who make this show possible. Of course, Alana Cody. Alana Cody, our producer, our editor, our predator extraordinaire. She is putting together all of these shows and boy has a lineup of stuff for us over the next few weeks, so we're going to be busy. We also have to thank Kays Alatracci. Kays has been composing all the music that you hear on the show and doing a fantastic job. You can also follow Kays on YouTube, where Kays fixes synthesizers, and it's called Kays Lab.
KaysLabs.com. If you have a synthesizer deeply in need of being fixed, Kays will fix it for you in exchange for monies.
Indeed. You might have a synthesizer. It might need repair. Kays can probably do it.
Kays is the one to do it.
All right. So Ben, that's it for this episode. You want to take us out?
Thanks for tuning in. This has been Cinepod, the cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory at hotrodcameras.com. Watch and subscribe to our show on YouTube or listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow and interact with us on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn, but not X. Don't do that. Thanks for tuning in.